Well, hello all. Good evening. Back to the live streaming of the daily news analysis series. And today we will be understanding the important news articles for 8th August 2022. And so, so this is your educator Prithviraj Singh, and we do the daily news analysis series in the evening hours from the ClatPrep headquarters. Now, let us begin with the first news article on the screen. All right. So this talks about this article talks about the cooperative federalism as a concept. It means that the state and the center would work hand in hand, right? Because federalism as a concept means that the powers are being divided into the center and the state. That means there is a vertical division of powers between the center and the state. When I say division of powers, I mean the division of executive power, legislative power, and financial powers. Right. So we know that we have Schedule 7, which talks about the federalist. This says that the powers are vertically divided between the center and the state. So there are some subjects over which only the parliament can make laws mentioned in the list 1 of Schedule 7, also called as Union List. Then there are some subjects over which the state can make laws mentioned in list 2nd, also called as state list. The list 3 is those subjects where both the center and the state can make laws, also called as concurrent list. Right. So in this way, the legislative, executive, and financial powers are vertically divided between the center and the state, and this is called as federalism. Now, for the proper functioning or the smooth functioning of democracy, and the governance, cooperative federalism is sine qua non. It is something which is unavoidable, right? And Niti Aayog, which designs the policies and the planning for the country, which actually replaced Planning Commission in the year 2015, 1st of January 2015, it follows a bottom-up approach, right, against the top-bottom approach, which was being followed by Planning Commission. Right. So Niti Aayog, we know that the chairperson is the prime minister, and then he appoints the vice chairman of Niti Aayog. Now, Niti Aayog, when I say that it follows a bottom approach, it clearly means that all the states have their representation in the Niti Aayog. That means all the 28 states would be represented by the chief ministers, and in fact, even the union territories, which have the with state assemblies like Delhi, Pondicherry, and now Jammu and Kashmir, would be represented by their respective chief ministers, and plus those union territories who do not have the state assemblies would be represented by their administrators, right? So Niti Aayog follows a bottom-up approach. You should keep this in mind, and it includes all the chief ministers and the administrators of the states and the union territories, respectively. Right. On the other hand, Planning Commission didn't had any state representation because, and that is the reason why it was following a top-bottom approach. Correct. It didn't had a representation of states. Now, Niti Aayog's governing council. So there was a meeting held in New Delhi on Sunday, that is yesterday, and it was seventh governing council meeting of Niti Aayog since its inception or since its formation, in the year 2015. Now, in this meeting, the states did participated, and there were 23 chief ministers. The states which didn't participated are Telangana and Bihar. Correct. So there were 23 chief ministers being called upon, being participated. They participated and they discussed on a variety of issues, plethora of issues, and the important ones among them were definitely crop diversification, new education policy, urban governance. They talked about self-sufficiency or achieving self-sufficiency in pulses, oilseeds, and other agri commodities. Correct. So they were, because it is the objective of the government to make India self-sufficient, in pulses, oilseeds, and agri commodities. They also talked about urban governance, which is the first area. They in fact also discussed about the modernized agriculture, animal husbandry, and food processing, right, to become self-sufficient and a global leader in agriculture sector, right? So it is clear that the first area is agriculture, modernization of agriculture, animal husbandry, food processing, so on and so forth. So as India becomes a global leader in farm sector or in agriculture sector, because we have huge potential in agriculture sector. At the same time, the growth of the nation, you know, lies Prime Minister discussed that the country would be hosting G20 presidency, in the year 2023. Very important takeaway, because it, the country for the first time, would be hosting G20 meeting in the year 2023. And very important, Prime Minister has clearly said that we would not be conducting this in Delhi, right? So we would be moving it out from Delhi. There are even talks that they can hold it in the newly created Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Right. So it is a unique opportunity to show to the world that India was not just confined to Delhi, but include every state and union territory. Correct. So there should be a dedicated team for, and in fact, the Prime Minister stressed that there should be a dedicated team for a G20 in the states to derive the maximum possible benefit from the initiative. Correct. And each state should focus on promoting trade, tourism, and technology via every Indian mission around the world. So the first areas are agriculture, promoting trade, tourism, technology, urban governance, new education policy, the holding up of G20 presidency meeting in 2023. Right. So NITI Aayog, governing council meeting. It was the seventh one. I hope it is clear. Moving to the next news article on the screen. So this is in continuation to the first article. Before I jump to the second one, well, the states must focus on reducing imports and increasing exports because there have been capital outflow. That means when you're importing something, you have to pay in dollars, right? And you pay it from your foreign exchange reserves. So when there is a huge trade deficit, that means the imports are higher than exports. That means that the capital is flowing out, right? And this is called as capital outflow. And this results into deficit or trade deficit, which is not good for the financial health of a country. So so the Prime Minister in the Niti Aayog Council meeting said that the states must focus on increasing exports and reducing imports. In fact, the increased GST collection, which we just saw a few days back, we had the session, daily news analysis session, where we discussed that this is the second time, or in fact, the second highest GST collection since the enactment of the GST Act. And although the increased GST collection requires, the collective action by the center and the states, and we must not, be complicit of the fact that we have increased the GST collection because these are the unprecedented times we are facing. Russian crisis, post-COVID world, and even the global recession is also, hinging on us, American recession. But amidst all these challenges, our objective is to make our country a $5 trillion economy by the year 2025. Right. So, in the sense, for the first time, we have discussed we will be in this. In fact, it would be history for us. We'll be holding G20 meetings over the year, not only in Delhi but in every state and union territory. Correct. So, the agriculture expert in the Niti Aayog, Mr. Ramesh Chandji, he stressed on self-sufficiency in the area of edible oil. And in fact, India was currently importing edible oil worth about 1 lakh crore, right? So if I if I go into the statistics, half of the edible oils that we import to half of the edible oils that we consume in India are being imported, right? So this, half of the total demand is coming from imports. So this is actually, putting an stress or burden on the exchequer, correct? Because we have to pay in dollars, and it is actually, in fact, increasing the trade deficit. So India want to, be self-sufficient in the area of edible oil by reducing the import of edible oil, correct? So in fact, uh, they also stress that there is a key demand from the states to make the minimum support price, that is the minimum guarantee that the government assures to the farmers, is called as minimum support price for pulses and oil seeds more effectively, right? In fact, the Rajasthan Chief Minister Sri Gehlot ji sought better irrigation facilities in 13 districts for rapid growth in mustard cultivation, sarson ki kheti, right? Mustard cultivation. In fact, for the past 5 to 6 years, the production of pulses had gone up substantially, except for the deficit in masoor and arhar ki dal. Correct. So in this sense, the production of pulses is doing pretty well, except for the deficit in masoor and arhar dal. And in fact, the northeastern states of India were expanding the oil palm cultivation areas. So many minister, including the Chhattisgarh Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel, he reiterated the demand for a 5-year extension of GST compensation. And in fact, they also said that the Manrega be implemented in the rural areas located close to cities, right? So the student, there is something called as area in transition or transitionary area, those rural areas which are in transition to become an urban area, correct? And in those areas, if I talk about the urban local bodies, you have something called as Nagar Panchayat. Right? So Nagar Panchayat is the name for those urban local bodies which are in transitionary stage from rural to urban area, right? So in those areas which are located close to the cities and which has population of less than 20,000, there also Manrega should be implemented. They are rural areas, but because they are located close to the cities, and so therefore you must not declare them as the urban peripheries or urban areas, but there also the Manrega should be extended. So these are some first areas which were being discussed during the governing council meeting, in fact the 7th council meeting of Niti Aayog. I hope it is clear. It's very, very important. Moving to the next news article on the screen. The satellite launched by SSLV is in wrong orbit and not usable. It's being quoted by ISRO, India's Space Research Agency. Now, SSLV is Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. Students, we are aware about PSLV and GSLV, right? Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle and Geosynchronous Launch Vehicle. Now, PSLV is being heavily used by ISRO, to place the satellites in the polar orbit. It is not of much height as compared to the GSLVs, because GSLV satellites are being stationed, orbit at around 28 to 35, thousand kilometers from the Earth, and they are geosynchronous, correct? That means from a point on Earth, they appear to be stationary. That means their rotation around the Earth takes exactly the same time as the Earth takes rotating around its axis. That means they also take 24 hours. I'm talking about geosynchronous launch vehicle satellite, geosynchronous launch vehicle. So it's a rocket launch, right? GSLV. Now, many satellites are, for the space mission like the Chandrayaan, the Mangalyaan, they all were being launched from the GSLV, right? And it requires the cryogenic technology, right? Liquid hydrogen, cryogenic engines. On the other hand, PSLVs or Polar Satellite Launch Vehicles launch the satellite in a lower orbit, somewhere around 5,000 kilometers, etc. And in fact, they rotate from pole to pole. That means from North Pole to South Pole. And in this sense, it tries to cover every region, as the Earth is rotating towards east. So when the the satellite launched through PSLV rotates from North to South Pole, it covers almost all the areas on the Earth, right? Now, the third category that we have experimented, and mind you, PSLV is a very successful model, similar as is GSLV. We have tried our hands, in fact, on a new project called as SSLV, which is Small Satellite Launch Vehicle, and it's being used for launching very less weighted satellites, which we'll understand in the next slide. Now, the SSLV vehicle that we used is this time, was SSLV D1, but unfortunately, it placed the satellite in the wrong orbit. In fact, it was an elliptical orbit and not a circular orbit, so it is not usable and it is a failed mission. Uh, ISRO will ISRO has said clearly that we will come back soon with SSLV D2. Well, failures are something which are not, which doesn't come as a disappointment, but something we learn from with much more experience and much more sagacity. Right. So, in fact, even PSLV's first launch was not successful. And anyways, so SSLV D1 carrying it carried two satellites, EOS-O2. EOS means Earth Observation Satellite, and then Azadi satellite, Azadi satellite. So, so ISRO chairman, as you all know, as Somnath has clearly said that we will be successful in our next mission, SSLV D2. And in fact, SSLV D1 was the first mission of to launch any satellite through small satellite launch vehicle. And in fact, rather this set is a passenger student satellite, designed by a group of girl students, right? So the girl students from the rural regions across the country provided guidance to build these payloads, right? So there is an organization called as Space Kids India, and it actually helped in, launching Azadi satellite. Whereas EOS-O2 or Earth Observation Satellite belongs to the microsatellite series of spacecraft, right? So microsatellites are those satellites which are very less in weight, right? And for them, you would require a very large, very heavy rocket launchers like PSLV and the GSLV. In fact, SSLV would work, and in this sense, it would save the cost and energy. So ISRO had targeted the SSLV market, which places the satellites into 500-kilometer low Earth orbit, right? So just 500-kilometer low Earth orbit. So I hope you're getting my point. And so this is there. I hope it's clear. Now moving to the next news article on the screen. Well, the center is reprimanding the states for holding up results of economic census. Now, students, as we have the census every 10 year or decadal census, 2011, 2021, although because of pandemic, 2021 census got postponed to assess the population, and in fact, the demography of the country. Similarly, you also have economic census, correct? And it was the seventh economic census which was being conducted in the year 2019. In fact, the last economic census was carried out in the year 2013-14. Getting my point? So the last economic census was carried out in the year 2013-14, and the seventh economic census was in the year 2019. But we are in 2022, but still the results has not yet been published. Now the central government has reprimanded states to for holding up the results of economic census and not really releasing the results, right? Now we must understand that the economic census do collects the statistics of the formal and informal non-farm enterprises, and in fact uh, uh, in fact, there is a lack of requisite nods from the states and UTs for the provisional results, right? Now, so we are clear with two, three important concepts. The first is it was the seventh economic census. Second fact, the last economic census was carried in the year 2013-14. The third fact, economic census or EC is conducted every 5 years, right? So it is unlike your population census, which is conducted every 10 years. Economic census is carried every 5 years. The last was in the year 2013-14. Getting my point? So in this sense, after every 5 years, so ideally, economic census seventh was carried out in the year 2019, 2021, but because of pandemic in 2020, it got stressed, extended up till 2021, right? But till date, the findings are not yet being released, and in fact, the central government is saying that the states should not hold up the results and should release them sooner than later. Right. So in fact, this is the first economic census where we have deployed IT-enabled tools for, you know, and in fact, all the data analyticals, real time, etc., were being used, and in fact, the state level coordination committees are being set up, and they are being chaired by the chief secretary of the state, who actually gives assent to the data, and in fact, and then they are being published. It's a central sector scheme, and the latest economic census, the seventh one, is expected to capture the changes in India's economic landscape since the implementation of policy shifts such as demonetization, GST, and pairing of corporate taxes. So these changes would be reflected in the seventh economic census. I hope it is clear. Going to the next news article on the editorial page. Now, as we know that the repo rate has been increased by 50 basis points, and it is the third time in the past few months that the Monetary Policy Committee, which has six members, three from RBI and three from the government, has revised the repo rate, and in fact, it has increased it by 50 basis points. Now, before I go ahead with this article, let me explain you or brief you about repo rate. Now, repo rate, students, as you all know, is a rate which RBI charges when it lends money to the commercial banks, right? So whenever RBI is lending money to the commercial bank, because see, whenever you're lending, it is on some interest rate. So the rate or the interest rate which the RBI charges on the money that it lends to the commercial banks is called as repo rate, right? Now, in lieu of the money that it lends to the commercial bank, it actually takes government securities from the commercial bank, right? The government securities are the open market instruments, secondary market instruments, and they can be traded in the secondary market, right? So the government securities are being traded, in so in this way, the RBI lends money to the commercial bank in lieu of government securities, which are being later being repurchased by the commercial banks on the mutually decided date and fixed rate. Correct. So this rate which the RBI charges on the money it lends to the commercial bank is called as the repo rate. Correct. Now, imagine if the repo rate is increased, what will happen? Right. The commercial banks would be less enticed to borrow money from the RBI, right? Because the rate has been increased. Now they would be less enticed to borrow money from the RBI. And when in this situation, they would borrow less from the RBI, and in fact, they would focus on keeping their healthy reserves, right? Because what are total reserves? See, whatever money that you park into the bank, in the form of deposits, and the deposits may be the time deposits like fixed deposit, recurring deposits, or it can be demand deposits like your saving account or the current account, right? So a part of the total deposits is being reserved by the banks, you know, and from that reserve, some part is being loaned out for the interest earning projects, and there are some parts of the total reserve which is being kept as a mandatory cushion with the RBI, something also called as CRR, cash to reserve ratio, and also SLRs, right? So, so in this sense, when the repo rate is being increased, the commercial banks would borrow less from the RBI. In fact, they would be less dependent on RBI and would instead focus their efforts in increasing their own or strengthening their own reserves, right? And when they strengthen their own reserves, they would, lessen the money that they give to for loans, right, or the interest earning projects. And in this way, the money in the market would be reduced. Correct. And this would dampen the money multiplier, and this would in turn in absorb the excess liquidity from the market. Right. The excess liquidity which is there in the market would be absorbed by increasing the repo rate, right? And this would actually, in turn control the inflation. But because what is inflation? Inflation is nothing but too much money chasing too few birds. When you have more income, when there is more money supply in the market, but the supply is constrained. There is supply constraint. The supply is constant, right? So it would definitely, because when the supplies are less and the money is more, it would increase the demand. And if supply is not matching the demand, it would result into the increase in the prices. And this general increase in the prices is called as inflation. So some amount of inflation is always good for the society, but if it crosses the tolerable limit of being set up by the NPC, the tolerable limit or the tolerance limit which is being set up by the NPC is 4% plus minus 2%. So the lower tolerance is 4 minus 2 is 2%, and 4 plus 2 is 6%. Getting my point? So the inflation range should, tolerable range should be always between 2% to 6%. It should not be beyond 6% or not be less than 2%. Right. So this range is always good for economy. Right. But since past many months, the inflation, the retail inflation, and in fact, even the wholesale inflation are crossing 6% tolerance limit, which is a cause of worry. But Finance Minister Sitaraman has clearly said that in times of turmoil after Russian invasion, the post-COVID recovery, etc., and now definitely Taiwan crisis, the prices world over are overshooting. I mean, the inflation is is the worry the, throughout the world, right? But then also we are actually in a stable state. So whenever the inflation is high, that means there is more money supply in the market, right? So in order to control the inflation, you have to reduce the money supply or absorb the excess liquidity from the market, and that can be done so only by increasing the repo rate, right? So the RBI increases the repo rate so that the commercial banks would borrow less from the RBI, and in fact, divert their attention over maintaining healthy reserves, and thus it would result into less loans into the market, and thus absorbing the excess liquidity from the market, and thus controlling the inflation, also called as contractionary monetary policy. Getting my point? So, so this is how it works. So they have increased it this time by 50 basis points from 4.9% to 5.4%. Correct. So I hope it is clear. And so this is all we discussed about the same. They're in fact saying that globalization of inflation is coinciding with deglobalization of trade, especially after many upheavals. So there are global inflationary surges. I hope it's clear. Moving to the next news article, there from the editorial section, which talks about harnessing technology to check minor mineral plunder. Now there has been a minor mineral plunder or plunder in the minor minerals. Now minor minerals are the word that we use for sand and gravel, right? Because today sand mafias are there, doing their jobs and business freely without any check and balance. So therefore, it in fact results into environmental degradation. Correct. So there have to be proper check, and that can be done only through technology. Although we do have many laws to check rampant and illegal mining of minor minerals, but then it continues unabated, right? So therefore, the author is contemplating over technology and the use of technology, in fact, to check such plunder of the minor minerals. Well, we do have the environmental impact assessment or EIA notification of 1994 and 2006, and it makes the environmental clearances compulsory for mining in areas more than or equal to 5 hectares, right? So whenever you are mining in any area which is greater than equal to 5 hectares, getting my point, you do require the environmental clearance from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And it is as per the Environment Impact Assessment Notification 94 and 2006. I repeat again, any area where you're mining which is beyond greater than equal to 5 hectares, you require environmental clearances under the EIA notification 2006 and 1994. Now, you do also have a, district environment impact assessment authority and a district expert appraisal committee. Right? Well, there is a rejection rate at the state level, which has been a mere 1%. Correct. That means most of the proposals by EIA are being, are being passed. So the rejection rate is very less, and this is a sign of worry, right? Because EIA, in this sense, is something. I mean, it is not actually performing its function because if 99% of the proposals that come to the EIA are being passed, then there is no point in actually having a EIA kind of uh, EIA kind of body. Correct. Now, in fact, the United Nations Environment Program (UNEP) in 2019 ranked India and China as the top two countries where illegal sand mining has led to sweeping environmental degradation. Right. So therefore, it is also this a cause of worry. And in fact, the demand for soil has severely affected uh, soil formation and the soil holding ability of the land. And the soil mining, sand mining is majorly being done in the beds of Godavari, which is also called a Dakshin Ganga, a very big river, huge river in Indian Peninsula. Narmada, Mahanadi, again a peninsular river. Illegal mining causes a copious loss to the state exchequer, right? Because they're losing revenue, from the 70% of mining activities. So out of 100, only 30% of the area which is being mined is legally mined, right? The rest, 70% is illegal, correct? So they are sand mafias, and in fact, many IS officers are being threatened by this lobby, right? So there must be a law compliance. There is, and the problem is the malfunctioning of governance due to weak institutions, poorly drafted regulatory provisions, inadequate monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, and excessive litigation that dampens the state administrative capacity. Well, the author is saying to use technology to actually check such minor mineral plunder and satellite imagery using drones, Internet of Things, blockchain technology can be leveraged to monitor the mechanisms by using GPS, radio frequency, or RF locators. And in fact, the state governments such as Gujarat and the judicial directions, such as the High Court of Madras, have employed some of these technologies to check illegal sand mining, right? So you can always quote Gujarat and the High Court Madras decision in deploying the technology to check illegal sand mining, right? So important article. I hope it is clear. Going to the next news article on the screen. Now, this article talks about how the judges to the Supreme Court and the High Court are appointed and the transfer of the High Court judges. And the third issue is it explores is the appointment of the Chief Justice of India. Right now, students, we know that the Justice N.V. Ramana, who is the present Chief Justice of India, his tenure is drawing to an end in a few days, and it is very clear that Justice B.V. Nagaratna, the senior most judge, would be, the next judge they would be appointing very soon. But recently, the Collegium, the Ramana Collegium, scripted history by getting 9 Supreme Court judges appointed in one go, right? For the first time in the history of Supreme Court, 9 judges were appointed in one go, and of the 9 judges, Justice B.V. Nagaratna is in line to be the first women Chief Justice of India in the year 2027. Right, so this is there. Now we have seen only the normally the convention is that the senior most judge is being appointed as the Chief Justice of India, and seniority is based not on age but based on the day of appointment into the Supreme Court. Right, those judges which are being appointed first or elevated first into the Supreme Court would be senior to the other judges, right? And they would be escalated to the Chief Justice of India post, right? So this convention or this norm has been broken only twice in during the emergency time by the Indira Gandhi government, and there have been only two supersessions to the office of CJI in the 1970s. Now there are various cases which actually reflect the tussle between executive and judiciary, and this actually showcases the how collegium model is being used. See, the collegium is nothing but a body to appoint the judges into the Supreme Court and the High Court. Correct. Now we do have the article in our constitution which says, which reads Article 124, Clause 2, right, where it says that the president, on the consultation of the Chief Justice of India, would appoint the judges into the Supreme Court. Right. Now, is this consultation, binding, right? That means the consultation which is being given by the Chief Justice of India, is it binding on the executive or the president? Now, this, or it is, on the whims and fancies of the president. Now, this question actually, uh, uh, was deliberated into various Supreme Court cases, and the first judge's case, held that consultation means concurrence. That means the the consultation with the Chief Justice of India should be full and effective, right? That means President cannot appoint any person on his own whims and fancies, on his own discretion, but only on the concurrence of the Chief Justice of India. That means on the full and effective consultation of the Chief Justice of India. So that was the first judge's case. The second judge's case came in the year 1993, and it also said, it reiterated that the consultation is concurrence. Plus, it also said that the collegium would include two senior most judges of the Supreme Court, right, apart from the Chief Justice of India. So the two senior most judges of the Supreme Court would sit as the collegium, and then they would recommend a name through this thing, right? And then the Chief Justice of India, as a body of the collegium, would work on democracy, on majority principle, and out of three, because two plus one, two plus Chief Justice of India, if two are in favor of any particular person to be elevated as judge, then they would send the recommendation to the president, and who in turn is bound by the recommendation to Chief Justice of India, right? So this was the second judge case where a collegium was formed of two senior most judges in the year 1993. Coming to the third judge case. Now, the present collegium system that we see and we discussed, in a while, is that of three judges case, right, which appeared in the year 1998. Now, this said that part, this expanded the collegium from two to four. That means there will be four senior most judges of the Supreme Court, which will be the part of the collegium, and then they would recommend the Chief Justice, Chief Justice of India, who, so it would be four plus one or four plus CGI body. That means five, and it would work on majority, and then the name they would forward it to the president, who in turn is bound by such a recommendation. Right. Now, the Collegium of the Chief Justice of India and the four senior judges of the Supreme Court make recommendations for the appointment to the Supreme Court and as well as High Court. Right. So this is something which has to be kept in mind. So I hope it is clear. Now, judiciary should have primacy over the government in matters of appointments and transfers in order to remain independent. So this is a basic tenet behind, behind the collegium system, and this is actually, strengthens the judicial independence. Although today there is lack of transparency, and in fact the collegium system is being criticized by the outsiders as well as within the judicial institution, right? Of For its lack of transparency, for its being accused of nepotism, so and so forth. In fact, even the present government, they came up with a bill called as NJAC, or National Judicial Appointment Commission Act, where the law minister would be included into the collegium, That means there would be a direct interference of executive into the judicial appointments, and this actually was killing the judicial independence, and it was being realized by the Supreme Court, and later it was being struck down. Right. Now, there is also a memorandum of procedure which is to be followed for the appointment of the Chief Justice of India and the judges of the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice of India and the judges of the court, the Supreme Court, are appointed by the President under Clause 2 of Article 124, which we just discussed. And the appointment to the office of Chief Justice of India should be of the senior most judge of the Supreme Court, right? Considered fit to hold the office. So this is very clear, and it was being validated only few times in 1970s. Now, Union Law Minister would, at an appropriate time, seek the recommendation of the outgoing Chief Justice of India on his a successor. Well, the collegium would recommend a candidate to the Union Law Minister. The CBI would also ascertain the views of the senior most judge in the Supreme Court who hail from the High Court, from where the person recommended would come. Right. So this is there. Right. So I hope you're getting my point. So the collegium would recommend a candidate to the Union Law Minister, and the CBI would also ascertain the views of the senior most judges in the Supreme Court who hail from High Court, from where the person recommended comes from. If the CBI had consulted non-judges, right, then it has to be declared, and the memorandum containing the substance of consultation, which would also be a part of the fight. Right? Now, today, guys, there are around 71,000 pending cases in all the court, in the court. I'm talking about the Supreme Court itself, you know, and in fact, it has risen with time. Although the number of the strength of the judges, we have increased, but the pending cases are also increasing every year. Well, the successor, the next Chief Justice of India, which would be Justice U. Lalit, has a big responsibility on his shoulders of the problems of areas and the vacancies. That means pending pendencies and the vacancies in the apex court, and this he has to resolve, right? So this is all about this very important article on the judicial system or the collegium system of the Supreme Court. I hope it is clear, and I expect a question on this. Moving to the next news article about Great Barrier Reef recovery and vulnerability to climate threats. Now, students, we know about the corals, right? So, coral are the microscopic organisms that are found in the tropical or shallow waters, and they secrete calcium carbonate, right? And when they die, their skeleton forms the heart is forms the forms the surface, and where it results in the formation of reefs and also some coral islands. Right. Now, the highest, the biggest coral island or coral island group is the Australia's Great Barrier Reef and the northern coast of Australia, where also the last Commonwealth Games was being held, and near to that, so it is the Great Barrier Reef or GBR, right? And but a recent report in fact, the March this year, they have experienced they've explored mass coral bleaching, and it is the highest level of, although there is highest level of coral covers within the past 36 years, but then it is experiencing bleaching. You understand what is bleaching? Now, before we do that, let me make you understand what are corals, which we already discussed. But then every coral is called a polyp, and thousands of such polyps live together to form a colony, right? And they grow because they are microscopic organisms. And they're found in shallow waters, warm tropical waters, which grow when polyps multiply to make copies of themselves. Right? So there are two types of corals: hard corals and soft corals. Hard corals extract calcium carbonate from the seawater to build hard, white coral exoskeletons, right? Whereas soft corals attach themselves to such skeletons and older skeletons built by their ancestors, right? So hard corals are much more strong because they extract calcium carbonate from the seawater to build hard white coral skeletons. Right? Now, Australia's Great Barrier Reef, as per the survey, is increasing. At the same time, there is also mass coral bleaching. There is the world's largest reef system, stretching of almost 2,300 kilometers and having nearly 3,000 individual reefs. While the coral reefs support over 25% of marine biodiversity, even as they take up only 1% of the sea floor. Getting my point? So coral reefs support over 25% of marine biodiversity, uh, even as they take up only 1% of the sea floor. So this is how important they are for the marine diversity. Besides, the coral reef system generates $2.7 trillion in annual economic value through goods, GST, and goods and service trade and tourism. Right, so it's huge revenue resource. Coral cover is measured by determining the increase in the cover of hard corals, which has been positively increased. Uh, and they are being fueled largely by increasing the fast-growing acropora corals, which are dominant type of coral in GBR range. Right now, they are most susceptible to environmental pressures such as rising temperatures, cyclone, pollutions, and crown of thorns starfish or COT attacks. Now, scientists have found that the biggest threat to the health of reef is climate change induced heat stress resulting in coral bleaching. Right? So we'll understand that how the heat stresses are resulting into the coral into the coral bleaching. Well, well, the corals share a symbiotic relationship with single-celled algae called zooxanthellae, right? So you have a single-celled algae called as zooxanthellae, and they share a symbiotic relationship with that algae, right? But when this algae in fact prepares food through photosynthesis, and this food is being used by the corals, it also gives them their vibrant coloration, right? So this algae, zooxanthellae, gives them color plus the food which it prepares through photosynthesis. Getting a point? Now, when this algae is exposed to the heat conditions like heat stress, pollution, high levels of ocean acidity, the zooxanthellae start producing reactive oxygen species not beneficial to the corals, right? Reactive oxygen species, and this results into this. So the corals then starts kicking out the algae from their polyps, and this exposes them their pale white exoskeleton, leading to coral starvation, because they start eliminating or kicking out these algae because of the reactive oxygen species that is being produced because of the heat stress, and this leads to coral starvation as coral cannot produce their own food. And when they cannot produce their own food, the bleached corals can survive depending on the levels of bleaching and the recovery of sea temperature to normal levels. Right. And this is called as coral bleaching. I hope it is clear. Over the last couple of decades, climate change induced risk rise in temperature has made sea warmer than usual, right? And according to United Nations assessment in 2021, the world is going to experience heating at 1.5 degrees centigrade in the next decade, right? So, we are now clear that this about the mass bleaching, and in fact, this first mass bleaching event occurred in the year 1998 when the El Nino weather pattern caused the sea surfaces to heat up, causing 8% of the world's coral to die. Now, the second mass bleaching event happened in 2002, but the longest and the most damaging bleaching event took place from 2014 to 2017, right? And the mass bleaching then occurred again in 2020 and then this year, right? So this is a sign of worry, right? A big worry, because see, it actually results into extension of around 10% of coral reefs, which is highly important for the preservation for marine ecosystem, right? So this year also in the March, the Australian Institute of Marine Sciences uh, have 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 found the mass coral bleaching in the month of March this year, right? This is its report. Correct. So this is a cause of worry, and 91% of the reef it had surveyed, in the March were affected by bleaching. So this is a shocking reality, right? So the Australian Institute of Marine Sciences have surveyed that 91% of the reefs are affected by bleaching. Well, The increase in marine heat waves is there, and that will last longer, and ongoing risk of COPs, that means crown of thorns star pit attacks, is always there. So I hope this article is clear. Going to the next article. Well, China continues its drill in Taiwan Strait after the visit of the Speaker of House of Representative America, Nancy Pelosi, and it has announced live fire exercises on Yellow and High Sea, which lies between China and Korean Peninsula. Right. So we have to be aware about the geopolitical situation of Yellow and Buhai Sea. Let us be on the screen. So this is how it looks, the geographical situation. So here is South China Sea, and here you find to the southwest of North Korea and South Korea, you have Yellow Sea and a small packet, passage of water which connects into the inland China is Buhai Sea, right? So Yellow Sea and Buhai Sea, right? So this is how it is located. So Yellow Sea, North Korea, South Korea, and this is the East China Sea, right? So they may ask question over this, and we know that this is Taiwan, right, to the south of East China Sea, right? So this is Yellow Sea, and to the south is Taiwan, a residual province of China or a renegade province of China, which China claims. And this is where Bohai Sea, right? So Bohai Sea is near Beijing. So Bohai Bay, Beijing, and then you have North Korea, South Korea, and the Yellow Sea, right? So or this is all for today. I hope you enjoyed this session. Stay tuned for all such updates. Do press the like button and post any question that comes to your mind. This is all for today. Wish you all the best. See you in the next class. Good day. Goodbye. God bless you.